Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you, Chami. And yeah, I see there's only 2 cameras on, and I am somebody who loves to have cameras on so that I can see devotees. Thank you, Rita. But yeah, please do, if you can, please do put your cameras on. It'll be nice. So yeah, I thought I'd just share a few things before we get into the question answers, because whereas Krishna Katha without sharing a few things, right? So it was interesting because kind of just wanted to share a reflection actually, because Chami asked me if I could come and do these Q&As a couple of weeks ago. And back then I was reading something called Chaitanya Charitamrita, and I don't know if the devotees on the call know the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but it's basically a book in short of the life journey of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is a devotee incarnation of Krishna. And I was reading a specific section, which is a conversation between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai. Ramananda Rai is just a devotee, a very exalted devotee. And that conversation is very interesting because it's basically Mahaprabhu is inquiring about the secrets of spiritual life. And every time Ramananda Rai would give an answer, Mahaprabhu would be like, okay, that's nice, but tell me something more. This is nice, but tell me something more. And it comes to a point where Ramananda Rai starts talking about the different relationships with Krishna, and then comes to the gopis, and Mahaprabhu is still like, okay, that's the best thing you can give me, but you can tell me something even deeper. And it ultimately comes to this point where what Mahaprabhu is really after from Ramananda Rai is this understanding, this mood of glorifying the name, fame, qualities, pastimes of Krishna and his devotees. And I mean, who am I to understand these things? But when I was reflecting on this, I tried to do what I do best, which is trying to see what can I learn from this? Yeah. And what came to mind is a Bhagavad Gita verse, which many of you may know, which is chapter 10, verse 9. Machita madgata prana bodhayanta parasparam kathayancha shamam nityam tushyanti charamanti cha. And the translation is that the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. Unquote. So this idea that at the heart of being a devotee, it is to relish our relationship with Krishna, relish Krishna Katha, right? Discussing with the devotees. And Krishna Katha is meant to be something that is inspiring, enlivening, and exciting for us because it's encouraging us to develop our own love and attraction towards Krishna. And what better way than the Krishna book, right? Srila Prabhupada's Krishna book, where we're going through the stories, the pastimes of Krishna himself. So yeah, this was just a reflection because I just wanted to appreciate the efforts that Chami has put in to continuously, consistently serve this group by every week diligently hosting and spearheading this initiative to read the Krishna book together. And then also all of you guys who join regularly, or even as much as you can, because ultimately all the focus, the heart of being a devotee is to deepen our relationship with Krishna. And that's what Bhakti is about. And so I just wanted to say thank you to all of you, and also a special thank you to Chami for actually hosting these. So I know this isn't what you were expecting, Chami, but had to be done because ultimately, I'm not even joking. That was a reflection I was having when you approached me and I was reading that section. So yeah, I don't want to embarrass you too much, but yeah, hand over back to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Vajagovinda. We actually have some volunteers as well who are also on the call. So Neha Mataji is on the call, and I think we have Dharmini Mataji is also on the call. So all glories to them because they are also serving very diligently. And thank you to, all the devotees who come to the readings every week. And because of them, we're able to read the glories of Krishna. So we'll begin with some questions. And if anyone has any questions as we're discussing, please feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself. We'd love to hear from you. But we do have quite a long list of questions that devotees had sent in during the week as requested. So I thought we'd start with one particular question that stands out to me, because during the introduction, Prabhu, you were saying how, you know, the essence is to talk about Krishna, to glorify Krishna, to speak his glories, you know. And one of the questions one of the devotees had was, we know, and Krishna himself, of course, knows that he is the most beautiful, the most praiseworthy of all. And Krishna knows this because he knows what's in our hearts. He can see what's in our hearts. So he knows how we feel towards him. And so if that's the case, and Krishna can see in our hearts how we feel about him, why is there so much of an emphasis in KC to praise Krishna all of the time?
It's a really nice question. Just so I know where you guys are at in Krishna book, what chapter are you guys on?
Oh, good question. I think, Dharanmini Mataji, did you read last time? I think we're on chapter 65 or 66, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm sure someone, a reader, can let us know.
60, we are starting 64, Prabhuji.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you've been through all the Vrindavan pastimes.
Yeah.
So thank you for the question. And yeah, it's an interesting thing. If Krishna knows how much we love him, if we in our heart can feel the love for Krishna, then why do we need to always constantly think of or glorify Krishna? But when you go to the latter pastimes of Vrindavan, when you look at just the gopis section, like chapters 30 or some around there, then you see that actually this mood of love for Krishna is a very high mood, right? What we have is barely a reflection of that love, actually. Because in that section, and okay, I won't read it now, but you can see that there's a natural attraction from the gopis to Krishna. Yeah. So when we talk about why do we have to glorify Krishna so much, etc., when you think about the actual inclination of love, then it's very natural to always want to talk about the object of love. If you think about, I mean, I guess Nisha and Kiran have joined, but when we did Gita Life back in September, October, there was a devotee couple and the wife was pregnant, right? And now she has a child. Anytime you speak to her, her natural inclination is to talk about the child. Why? Well, doesn't the mother know that she has love in the heart for the child? Doesn't the child know that the mother loves her or him? Yes, but because she's so absorbed in love for the child, that affection naturally pours out. And so we can see that, yes, on the one side, Krishna wants us to glorify him, but it's because if we were in love with Krishna, that's all we'd be doing. And another example, and I don't know if this is actually scriptural or if devotees just generally kind of give this analogy, but if you imagined a boy and a girl who are very deeply, infatuated with each other, then there's a story that's given where there was a great saint, a great like sadhu, who was just, completely absorbed in his own devotion. And anytime he would look at the girl who was absorbed in that infatuation for another young boy, then his own inclination, his own thoughts of, I wish I had this level of absorption in my devotion to the Lord existed. He was praying that he had the same level of attraction to just thinking, always thinking and meditating on the Lord as that girl had for the boy. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but it's not so much that Krishna wants us to praise him, it's the fact that Krishna recognizes that if we had that love, that inner love all around us and within us, then we'd naturally just be wanting to talk about him, wanting to glorify him, wanting to talk about what he's been doing, the pastimes that we've been reading, because that is actually the epitome of love. You just are fully, your consciousness is fully in the object of love.
Yeah,
So
thank you, Prabhu. No, you very much answered it. And I like that the goal should always be that talking about Krishna, thinking about Krishna should come to the point of it comes naturally to us, not that it's something that we're consciously having to do. Thank you. Okay, another question that we had was that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the creator of the universe and the annihilator of the universe. And he wants all living entities to live peacefully and in harmony with each other. If that's the case, why does Krishna create such horrible demons that bring harm? You know, in the Krishna book, we read so much about demons and his fights with the demons, and for example, Ravana and all the hurt and destruction that Ravana caused. Why is it that the Krishna has these demons if he wants all of us to live peacefully?
So first thing I'd question is, what does a demon actually mean? Right? Because we can look at the demons in the Krishna book and say, okay, they are the demons. But what actually are demons? In the Bhagavad Gita, we see that demons are described as those who have demoniac mentalities. And demoniac mentalities means those who are basically trying to do two things. One is enjoy in the world, and second is control, right? Try to exert their control in the world. In the scriptures, we see that actually demons have a progression in life as well, right? In Satya Yuga, it's described that the demons were on separate planets. In Treta Yuga, demons were on the same planets, on the same planet, but different countries. In Dwapar Yuga, you see that demons were on the same planet, in the same country, because they're in the same family. And then in Kali Yuga, we see that actually the demons are inside us here. So a demon isn't something that Krishna has necessarily created, but it's our own tendency to enjoy and control in the world that creates this demoniac mentality. Because at the heart of demoniac mentality is to forget Krishna. It's this idea that we can enjoy, we can control without Krishna being in the picture. So yeah, ultimately we all have demons inside us, and it's our own desire, it's our own free will that is kind of pushing us towards cultivating this demoniac mentality. And we all have this, right? We all have this mood where, okay, I know I'm meant to be serving Krishna right now. I know my whole, the scriptures say my service is to always serve Krishna, but a little bit of enjoyment is okay. And that in that little bit of enjoyment, we forget Krishna. And there's various degrees of being a demon as well, right? A small little thing might be, maybe we won't call it a demoniac, but there's still that small control, that small element of enjoyment that we're after without Krishna. But then if somebody is trying to control and enjoy to such an extent that they're causing harm against others, even normal people will call that a demoniac mentality, right? Those who aren't practicing Krishna consciousness or any devotional path. So yeah, demons aren't necessarily created by Krishna in the way we perceive them, but it's more of this tendency, more of this desire to enjoy without Krishna or control without Krishna. And that's basically what the demons in the Krishna book have been doing, if you see. Their whole focus is on, I want to control, I want to enjoy, and Krishna's in my way, therefore I'm trying to get rid of Krishna also. And we have that within us to some degree.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. No, that was very insightful. And I think on that note, I have think two questions that will kind of go hand in hand with that tendency that we have in us to live apart from Krishna, live a life separate of Krishna, that Krishna has given us this free will to make all of these decisions ourselves. So why is it that if he wants us to be closer to him, why has he given us this free will to commit actions and sins that bring us further from him?
When we look at Krishna, Krishna has everything he needs and wants, right? I mean, that's one of the things about being the Supreme. They don't need anything. They have everything. They're self-satisfied. Oh, God is self-satisfied. But what Krishna wants And we see this again and again in the scriptures, especially in the Bhagavad Gita also. Patram pushpam palam toyam, yo me bhaktya prachati. Right? This idea that all Krishna wants is our love and devotion. He has everything, right? We belong to him. So Krishna could just force us to do something. He could just say, Chami, you're not going to the cinema today. I want you to just sit in the temple and, chant your rounds. Chant 64 rounds instead of 16 rounds and going to the cinema. But when we look at loving relationships, love isn't forced, right? Love isn't something that you impose on the other person, because then that's not love. You're forcing them to develop a relationship out of fear, out of duty. And so when you look at Krishna, that's all he's basically giving us. He's giving us the free will to say that, okay, I want to love you and I want your love, but I'm letting you choose whether you want to love me directly or indirectly and how you want to showcase that love. And then we could argue, okay, but then if somebody loves us, then they wouldn't let us do something bad. But I challenge that because, and I'll give a personal example on this, right? When I was a kid, I nagged my parents for a Game Boy. Game Boy? Yeah, the brick Game Boys, like back in the old days, right? I can't remember how much they were, like 50, 60 pounds or something back in the day. And that was a lot back in the day, right? 50, 60 pounds. And also for my family, it was much more because we weren't well off. Now, my parents could have gone, okay, Game Boy, it's not very good. It's just a toy. And also my mentality, I'm just giving everything away now, but my mentality was that I'd have a natural inclination to just enjoy something for 1 or 2 days and then literally just chuck it away and never look at it ever again. Most children have that, but I wasn't exactly that sort of age when I should be doing that. But I kept nagging and nagging and nagging and going, it wasn't even a supermarket, it was a market, like an outside market. And I was literally like nagging and crying my eyes out. And I wouldn't leave the stall until they got the toy. And it was only me and my mum. And so my mum had to call my dad, like this, blah, 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 blah. And then I ended up getting the Game Boy. Now, was that something that my parents wanted to do? Did they recognize that it was bad for me? Yes, they recognized it was bad for me. They recognized that actually in the grand scheme of things, it's not good. But I was nagging so much that in the end, the parents had to give in. And in the same way, in our life, we can nag so much that, Krishna, I really want this thing. Krishna knows what is good for us. Krishna knows what is bad for us. But if we're again and again nagging, and it doesn't have to be just this lifetime, but it could be lifetimes, we could be nagging for this sense of control, for this sense of enjoyment. Krishna will be like, okay, I can't force you to not have it because you keep nagging for it. So I have to give it. Just like a loving father, a loving mother will give it, but then also put controls over it. Like nowadays, if you see like iPads and, all these technological devices, there's parental control, right? You have a little app thing that you can just shut it off as soon as you want. I guess that's kind of what Krishna does. When he sees that we're misusing the freedom he's given us, then he'll give us a bit of the taste of, okay, you're kind of stretching a bit too much. I'm just gonna pull the collar a bit.
Thank you, Prabhu. And I guess, we have these tendencies to want to enjoy, to want to control. And so one of the questions was, can prayers, chanting, having that relationship with Krishna, can that change our behaviors and our characteristics so we actually move away from those tendencies to want to enjoy and control? Oh, you're on mute, Prabhu.
Oh,
sorry,
thank you. Prabhupada would pray every day to save me from Maya, to save me from this mentality to enjoy, this mentality to control, and this mentality to think that I've become somebody great. So yeah, prayers can help us and prayers can help others also. When you look at Srimad Bhagavatam in Prahlad Maharaj's pastimes, you see that his prayer was always about, I'm concerned about everyone else because they're bereft of a relationship with you in consciousness. So yeah, prayers definitely help. And more important than just saying a prayer is the mood, it's the intent behind the prayer. Are we saying the prayer because we actually we genuinely, sincerely want to mold our life in a way that helps us develop more of these spiritual qualities? Or is it just we're saying it because we kind of have been told we just need to say these prayers? You know, like oftentimes, especially those who are born in like Indian or Vaishnav families even, then it's like, okay, you know, you have to go in front of Krishna and just pray. But, you know, it's nice, it's good. But it's good to also cultivate this mood, this understanding of why we're praying for what we pray.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. This is a question that's come up a bit during our readings, so maybe you can help shed some light on it. But a big question I think many of us have is how do we manage and balance devotee duties when the friends, the family who surround us are all non-devotees?
Yeah, balancing Swadharma and Sanatan Dharma. So this idea of balancing our material duties with our spiritual duties. I'm just going to share my screen quickly because I thought this might help. And there is no laughing aloud, by the way, because I cannot draw circles to save my life,
Mhm.
as some people should know. Anyway, you can see my PowerPoint, right?
Yes.
Like a blank slide. Okay, so if you imagined that this was Krishna in the middle, right? Now, oftentimes when we think of balancing our duties, etc., oftentimes it's this pull and push about, okay, they're not devotees, but I guess there's two parts to the question. One is, how do we balance it for ourselves? And the second is, how do we help those around us become more spiritual? Right? So in terms of the first part, which is balancing, really it's about recognizing that we're in this world to serve and not to enjoy. Right? When we go through spiritual life, there's often a progression. Actually, let me just stop sharing for a second. When we go through spiritual life, there's this natural progression that we all go through, right? Every single one of us who follow a spiritual path will have been through at least two of these stages so far, and eventually we'll come to a third. The first one is where we're just looking at the world to enjoy, right? This is before we come to spiritual life. We're just thinking, okay, I want to go onto this beach holiday and just enjoy the sunshine or whatever it is. But when we start practicing spiritual life, then we come to this mood of, okay, everything around us isn't giving us the happiness that we're really after. So we try and escape everything in the world, escape our duties, escape work, escape family, and just try and run away from everything because we're like, okay, you know, spiritual life is there. I just want to focus on spiritual life and everything else is getting in the way. But then when we mature even more, we see that, okay, we have our duties towards family. We have our duties at work. We have all these other duties. And it's not about balancing them, but it's about seeing all of this as an opportunity to serve them. So what do I mean by that? So yes, we could see our family as, you know, they may well not be Vaishnava, they may well not be practicing the spiritual path. And we can see that, okay, you know, I have to do their thing and I have to do my thing. But the alternative is that you could see that your thing is to be spiritual. And spirituality means that you're supporting all these other people in your life, family, friends, etc., and raising them to a consciousness that helps them come closer to Krishna, because you're serving them to come closer to Krishna. And that leads into the second part also, which is that oftentimes we question, like, how do we bring them closer to Krishna then? Yeah. So if you imagine that there's Krishna in the center, and let me just change the color of the pen now, right? And around Krishna, you have all these circles, right? And I know these are not circles, but like I said, no laughing. Yeah. And I'm just going to keep it as that. Okay. So what are these circles? These circles, in what I'm trying to represent here, are like the circles of devotees, right? So those who are associates of Krishna, those who are very, you know, integral. Like in the book, in the Krishna book, you see there's the friends of Krishna, there's the gopis of Krishna, there's the parents of Krishna. They're all in a circle of Krishna. And then you've got like the acharyas, Prabhupada, etc., who are circle out. And then there's us. But then there's also the family friends who are not devotees. They're also on the outer circle. And the duty of any of us is to always try and encourage everybody to come closer into the ring of circles. So when we look at our so-called non-devotee family and friends, what we want to be thinking of is, okay, they have their relationship with Krishna, but it's just a circle outer than where we are. And so our service then becomes, okay, how can I connect them to Krishna, even in a small way? Now, they may not be on the stage where they're just thinking of, okay, yeah, you know, I want to practice spirituality, but I don't know how. They may be on the stage where, you know, I don't really value spiritual life much. I just value going to the cinema, going to the restaurants. But if you look at the relationship, what they actually value is time with you. If you look at husband, wife, if you look at parent, children, if you look at cousins, it's not so much the activity that they're excited about, it's the fact that they're doing it with you. And so what we can do is look at spiritual practices and go, okay, yeah, Krishna, 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 we just have to give Krishna. Or we can see that we want to raise their consciousness. We want them to be more conducive to Krishna, which means help them come closer to the mode of goodness. And please do let me know, Chami, if everybody is familiar with like the basics of Bhagavad Gita on this, because I'm aware I'm kind of speaking a bit more terminology. But this idea that, okay, instead of going to the restaurants, which is very much, you know, not so much mode of goodness, can we go for a walk in the park together as a family, as friends? Instead of going to the cinemas, can we, I don't know, sit at home and have quality conversations, right? Discussing what's been going on in life, how things are progressing, have a back and forth discussion. Like this, we can think of ways that actually brings them to a more conscious state of mind. And that brings them closer to Krishna anyway, because then eventually they'll be more open to spiritual conversations. So I don't know if that does answer the question, Chami, but yeah, that's kind of what comes.
No, thank you, Prabhu. You did, and you answered I think a couple of other questions that we had in terms of more on the practical level for those who are in the very outer circle, how we can slowly bring them in. And as you suggesting alternate activities that are more maybe focused on building that relationship eventually, you know. So yeah, thank you for that. Another question, and this is something I myself have thought a little bit about as well, and maybe others on the call too, is, you know, often you hear about devotees going through difficult times, you know, whether they are going through a sickness or whether they have a lot of family responsibility or, you know, difficult situations in their life. And often other devotees, you know, maybe their friends or family will reach out to you and you say, can you pray for them? Or can you pray for their behalf? Or can you devote some of your morning chanting to them? Sometimes it's hard to be in that mood that I'm not chanting for myself, but I'm chanting for someone else or on behalf of someone else. How can we have that mood to really want to pray for someone else?
That's a nice question, actually. As a Vaishnava, we recognize, as even in the scriptures, that a Vaishnava is paradukhi dukhi, right? A Vaishnava is somebody who can't tolerate the anxieties, the suffering of others. When we come to spiritual life, oftentimes we do have this focus on my spiritual life, my spiritual practice. Oh, I've got to get my rounds done. I've got to get my hearing and reading done. And we forget that the heart of being a Vaishnava is paradukhi dukhi, this idea that we have compassion for others because we can't tolerate them being in a suffering or, you know, in a distressed position. So I think there's a lot of maturity that is required, you know, and I'm not going to kind of sugarcoat it and say that, you know, if you look around and there's so many devotees who are focused on giving themselves to others, because the reality is we're all in our own journeys. We all have our own focus. And depending on where our maturity is, then we're able to actually think of other people. When you look at sannyasis, then you see that their life is dedicated to others. You know, a sannyasi's role is what? To just give themselves to others, right? they neglect their own health, they neglect their own sort of me time. If you hear like Keshe Maharaj or even other sannyasis, they talk about how like 11 months in the year, they're completely giving themselves to others. And so in order for them to recharge, they need that 1 month out. You know, even not even just sannyasis, but even those who are public figures in Krishna consciousness, they do the same. They give themselves to others for such a long time that they then need to retract to recharge. But maturity is there. It's having this compassionate mood towards others doesn't come naturally for a lot of us. But how can we help? How can we develop that compassionate mood? Well, one is by actually speaking to people. Like book distribution is an amazing service, because when you're doing book distribution, and if you haven't done it, then maybe try it, right? When you go on book distribution, even if you don't get a book out, make the goal to have a nice, pleasant conversation with somebody. And what you find is that when their heart opens up, then they share so much about their life with you that you then start thinking like, oh my gosh, they're going through so much. And when we wrap that with the wrapper of Krishna consciousness that we have, with the statements in the scriptures, when you go through the Krishna book, you know, all the anxieties that all of Krishna's devotee friends go through. When you listen to classes, or when you go through the Srimad Bhagavatam, the anxiety that all these other people go through, then you can develop that compassionate mood, because you're seeing that so many people are suffering. We're living in our head, our space, thinking, I'm suffering so much. But then when we speak, we hear and see that these people are actually suffering so much more than me. What I've got is just a blessing. So yeah, and I think, I don't know if Prakash was on the call, but there's a common theme that I've had recently, and maybe I just need to start doing it. It's the Science of Self-Realization of the book. You know, a lot of fundamentals are presented in that book in a way where we can take each section, just reflect. Like what I was suggested by a senior devotee, and I'm not going to go into the details. Actually, it wasn't a suggestion personally for me, it was for somebody else, but I almost took it like I know the devotee was also speaking to me, because I just got that hint. But reflection and just sitting with the philosophy and seeing how it applies in the world helps us be more firm in our Krishna consciousness, in a way that we see the world for what it is, dukkhala mishashvatam, which is temporary in a place of misery. And Science of Self-Realization is one such book that helps us really do that, because we can just take each passage, each passage is only a page max or a couple of pages max. And you can just read one passage a day and just see, okay, go through your whole day, just try to meditate on that section and see how it applies in life. And you'll see that actually we develop the vision of the lens through the scriptures, right? Shastra Chakshush, this idea of looking at the world through the lens of the scriptures. And when we do that, we can see that so many people are suffering. And at the root of it is because they don't have their relationship with Krishna in a conscious way. And so when we're suffering, that's also there. We're suffering because our consciousness isn't in Krishna. But all these other people are suffering so much more than us. So how can we not then lend that hand of support? And there's always three parts to it. One is lending the hand of support on a gross level, on a subtle level, and a spiritual level. Okay. Generally, as devotees, again, this is kind of a bugbear that I'm sharing, I guess, is we often think, okay, we're devotees, so we only want to share, or we only want to help people on a spiritual level, right? Like preaching to them by talking about Krishna to them. But sometimes people aren't ready for that. They're suffering so much on a bodily platform or in their mind that they can't just take up or hear, just chant and be happy. Right? And I'm sure all of us have maybe experienced this or said this ourselves to somebody, like, it's okay, whatever you're going through is fine, just chant and be happy, just chant and everything will be solved. That's true, that it will happen, but they may be so absorbed in their bodily or in their mental suffering that they can't accept that. And therefore, even as devotees, it's good that we want to provide spiritual solutions to material problems, and we should. But sometimes we should wrap it round with a bit of that material support also. But remember, the goal is to help them come closer to Krishna, not just alleviate them of their material situation. So I know the focus was on prayers, but yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu. No. So on the topic of suffering and devotee suffering, suffering in general, it's often said that the challenges that we face in this life are the result of karma from our previous lives. But it's hard to accept for those who for those who go through extended periods of suffering or difficulty. How can we accept that this is as a result of my previous karma? How can we come to terms with that?
So it's interesting you specifically talked about continuous suffering, right? This idea that it's this extended period of time. I was listening to Kanamkana Maharaj a couple of days ago, and he kind of talked about this point where, okay, yeah, on the one side, we've got the karma aspect, but when we look at what the world is created for, it's meant to be a school for us to learn. A school for us to learn to get out of the world, actually, to get out of the school, to graduate from the school, right? Nobody wants to go into school and stay stuck in school. We don't have it in the UK, but at least those who are conscious of the education system in India, you keep going to the same class, to the same year after year, until you pass and graduate from that class. But in the UK, we don't really have that concept, Whether you pass or fail, you either get kicked out or you move up the rank. But that's what the material world is for. So yes, on the one side, it's our karma, right? Philosophically, we understand that the karma is involved. But the other way we can look at it is that Krishna is trying to give us or create situations for us to learn something to get out, right? Now, we might not find it palatable that we're going through suffering after suffering, for extended periods of times, months, years, and it's just non-stop. But that's what the world is, Dukhalaya Mashashvatam, this idea that there's always suffering at every step. Padam padam yatvi padam. So the question is, we can then raise is, well, what am I meant to learn? I'm suffering so much. Clearly, if this world is for me to learn, then I'm not learning something. But I think I'm learning everything. So the scriptures describe that there's three types of learners. One type of learner learns by just hearing and reading, right? So somebody who's looking at the scriptures or somebody who has heard something and they go, okay, I understand what I'm learning, or I understand the lesson, and I'm just going to apply it into my life. Second type of learner is somebody who sees somebody else go through something and then learns it themselves and goes, okay, they're going through this, they did this thing, this is a consequence they went through, so I'm going to learn from that and avoid not do that or do it if it's a good thing. But there's a third type of learner, which is somebody who has to experience something for them to learn. And even then, sometimes we don't learn, right? So an example can be given of, like a child and a fan, right? Fan spinning, a child is like, oh, I want to touch the fan. The parent could say, no, don't touch the fan because it will hurt you. But the child will still be like, I want to touch it. And then the parent will be like, okay, I'll touch it instead. And then, they'll be like, it hurt me. But the child might still be like, I still want to go and touch it. So then the parent will be like, okay, for the child to learn the lesson, I'll let them touch the fan in a way that it's just a pinprick. It doesn't actually, do any big harm. And the child still might not learn sometimes, but the expectation is and the understanding is that the child will learn that, okay, I touch fan, when fan is spinning, I get hurt. And so what we need to look at is, okay, yes, we're going through the suffering, but what am I meant to learn? What am I not learning that Krishna is trying to teach me? You may not always find an answer, but that's where you see the other part of the school, which is this focus on wanting to actually develop more of a trust and more of a surrender to Krishna. Because if there's something this is where it gets really, spiritual life really gets interesting, at least for me, is where we come across a situation where we're like, I've tried all of my material things. I've tried going, you know, maybe it's a health issue. I've tried going to the doctor. I've tried going to the Ayurvedic specialist. I've tried my own research, but nothing is helping. And then as devotees, what do? Krishna, only you can help. When you look at Gajendra pastime in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Gajendra tried all he could. He looked at around her, his family, his friends, and it's like, you help, you save me from this crocodile. But none of them could help. And ultimately, Gajendra's own strength couldn't help him. So he goes, okay, I have no other choice but to go to Vishnu. When you look at Draupadi, when her sari was getting unrobed, she tried herself to save herself. She went around to everybody in the assembly hall to help her. But then it was like, okay, I can't do it. Nobody else is coming forward. Krishna, I'm all yours. And so when we go through suffering, whether it's short-term, long-term, medium-term, whatever it is, we can see those two aspects also. One is, what am I meant to learn? And the second is, how can I use this situation to develop more of a trust and faith and surrender towards Krishna? Because at the end of the day, this world is a school, and a school sometimes has good periods and bad periods. Exam periods are the worst periods. And maybe it's just an exam that we're going through. And I appreciate that probably comes out very insensitive, but yeah.
No, and it reminds me, Prabhu, of something that I heard, that Krishna will never give us a difficulty or a situation in our life that he knows that we cannot overcome. So remembering this during those difficult times is helpful for sure. I know I do still have a couple more questions, but I wanted to open it up to any of the participants on the call. If anyone has any thoughts or commentaries or questions, if they'd like to unmute themselves, and maybe we have time for one more question. Time goes very fast. No. Okay, if no one has any questions, I'll finish with one more question that I think will be nice. So, you know, we live in Kali Yuga at the moment, as we know, and Kali Yuga is defined, you know, as doom and gloom. Everything is going to get worse. Everything is going to, you know, downgrade over time. Is there anything in Kali Yuga that we can look forward to? Any kind of positive aspect? And then after you've answered this, I can see Shabani Mataji's hand is up as well. So maybe we can just quickly go to her.
Sure. Yes, Kali Yuga, the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. Everything goes degrade. But it's also described that at least I mean, is varying in terms of which 10,000 years, but it's described that there's also a golden age in the Kali Yuga, especially the Kali Yuga that we're in, where during this golden age, the Sankirtan movement, this idea, this concept of glorifying and congregationally chanting the holy names of Krishna become more and more prominent during that golden age. And so that's something that we can take shelter of in Kali Yuga. In the previous ages, you had to do sacrifices for many, many thousands of years. You had to, you know, perform austerities. You had to go to the temple and do all these elaborate worship. But in our age, all you have to do is pick up a bead bag, chant our rounds, come into kirtan halls, and chant with devotees. It's simpler said than done, but you know, that's what we can take shelter of in Kali Yuga. And it's actually very nice because it's also described that even the demigods are like queuing up to come here, you know, because they recognize that this 10,000 year period during the Kali Yuga age is the most auspicious and the easiest path for them to go back to the spiritual world. So keep that short.
Thank you, Prabhu. Shavani Mataji or Girish Prabhu, would you like to unmute?
Yes, Mataji.
Yeah.
Hare
And
Krishna.
please also share your divine form.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, quick question. You were talking about earlier about karma and the next life. And also we have understood from different lectures and reading that we get next life what we thinking at the time of death as well. So how these two things are interrelated, because of if our life next life is depend on our karmas or the previous life karmas, not sure how many, um, but if we're thinking something good or bad, at time of death we get that life. So how that karma plays in role in that one then?
Yeah, nice question. So how do we reconcile the fact that our next life is made up of our karma as well as our thoughts at death, when Krishna
Yeah.
says in the Bhagavad Gita that whatever you remember the time of death is where you go?
True.
I guess there's a couple of ways that you can answer that. So one way is, even scientifically speaking, if you research, then the general consensus and understanding is that what happens at the time of death is flashback.
Mm-hmm.
Our whole life's journey in this life comes back to us. All the events, all the thoughts, all the people that we have really absorbed our consciousness in comes back into our memory, just like, in an instant. And so from that, we can see that whatever karma we have accrued in this life, good or bad, also comes into that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the events and situations, etc., all comes into one. So then naturally, whatever we remember at the time of death is a compilation of all of our karmic actions in this life. Right, so that's one way to see it. Another way that you could potentially see it, and actually, before I go to a second way, does that help? Does that clarify even a bit, bro?
Yeah, I think it clarify in terms of it is ultimately the karmas what we incur in this life or the previous lives, whatever. So that comes into our thoughts at the time of death. So and we get into the same bodily figure next life.
Yeah. So then the second part is that desire aspect, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the desire at the time of death that carries us to the next life as well. And that, again, you can see that depending on what sort of karmic actions we've kind of focused on in this life, right? Like, for example, the very typical and easy example is somebody who has just spent their whole life eating meat. And it's not that they've just been ignorant about what eating meat is, but even after knowing how animals get killed
Yeah.
for them to be food on the plate, they're still desiring to enjoy the dish.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can see that they're consciously accruing that karma, and there's a desire there to eat the meat also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so at the time of death, that desire is basically a natural extension of all of the karma of eating the meat. So the karma and the desire go together at the time of death, because naturally our desires are based on what we've done in life, or what we feel like we've missed out on in life.
Yeah, so it's not overwriting one or the other then.
Correct. They both go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare
I
Krishna.
guess in typical Bhajagovinda style, I'll
Yeah.
give a twist to it. The interesting part is that no matter where we are in spiritual life, Krishna promises that our spiritual bank balance will never diminish, right? So no matter what our desires are at the time of death, if for whatever reason we don't think of Krishna, in the flashback, none of Krishna's pictures come to our head.
Yeah.
Krishna promises that he's going to make sure his picture is present. And so depending on our spiritual advancement, we may go to the spiritual world, or we may come back and still live in this world, or one of the planetary systems, but in a consciousness that helps us progress in our spiritual life, i.e. this concept, this understanding that we continue from where we left off. And you see that in the stories of the Bhagavatam also, like Bharat Maharaj, who was such a great devotee, Bhava Bhakti is described, almost the epitome of devotion he reached. But because he got attracted to supporting a deer, a small deer, out of affection, material affection, not spiritual affection, but material affection, instead of just going back to Krishna, he had to come back as a deer. So then the next life he could go back to Krishna.
But in Bharat Maharaj case, that he was doing all those pious activity anyway, but how that karma helped, I know that it helped because the deer came into the in a remembrance thing of the previous life. But how that karma helped in terms of getting into deer's body then?
Because his consciousness, his desire was to look after the deer. Right? So when you go through the pastime, at the end of the pastime, it's described that when he was basically about to die, he was thinking, oh, like, where is the deer? Where is the deer?
Yeah.
His consciousness was absorbed in the deer and looking after the deer. Like, what will happen to the deer? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
go on.
No, I'm saying that that's right, because his consciousness was his mind or absorption in the deer, and he gets into the deer body. But how that karma helped in that way then, because he was pious and everything, he was doing right things to go to the spiritual world or towards the spiritual world, next level, and end up in the deer life,
Because Krishna arranged that, because he practiced spiritual life for most of his life,
Yeah.
because of that desire for the deer, he had to come back for the deer, right?
Mhm.
In the body of a deer. But when you look at the pastime, that deer was surrounded by sadhus.
Yeah.
The deer was in a spiritual, land.
Mhm.
And so the deer was, it sounds weird, but Bharat Maharaj, in the form of a deer, was
Yeah.
able to continue his practice, so
Mhm.
that even though in the deer body he couldn't, sit down and chant, etc., he was always getting this spiritual nourishment from all those around him.
Yeah.
So that in his next life, for those who don't know, he then comes back as Jada Bharat in a human form,
Yeah.
who is fully conscious that his only mission in life is to be spiritual.
Yeah.
So it helped him by the way of Krishna making sure that even though his desire was to basically his consciousness was absorbed in a deer,
Mhm.
when he takes the form of a deer, his atmosphere is spiritual, so that when he comes back in his next life,
Is
he is fully aware of his spiritual goal.
Yeah. Okay. That helpful. So last question, Prabhuji. I know it's time is ticking as well. And it says in Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, in the waning 6 month of waning of the moon time, then if you die during that time, you go straight to the spiritual world, never come back. And if you die in other 6 months, you'll stay here. So how that karma plays role in that? Whether I'm the bad person, but I've exactly died in the same time when the time is to go to the spiritual world.
That's a good question. I don't know an official answer to that, to be honest.
No problem, but I think there must be some correlation somewhere. Um,
Yeah, I know you're talking about Bhagavad Gita. I don't remember what chapter it is, but there is a section,
yeah.
and then at the end of that section, it's clarified that devotees actually don't care about that. But yeah, we'd have to. That's a good question. I don't know, Chami, if you have Prabhu's number, then it'd be nice to kind of just see what happens, because I have an understanding, because it's probably in that latter part of that section of that chapter, which
Mm.
Prabhupada talks about the devotee's consciousness.
No, but in general, I don't think that is applicable, because when Krishna is speaking about this, I don't think he's talking about particular devotee, right? He's talking about in general. So it doesn't matter I'm devotee or not, whether I'm doing Krishna conscious right now or not. If I'm dying on that period, I don't know where I'm going, but after reading this, I would imagine, okay, by chance, any luck, if I have that mercy, I will die in that period and I'll go back and never come back here. Um, so
Yeah,
all of
no,
my karmas are disappear immediately.
yeah, no, I see your point, Prabhu. But I think we'll have to visit, because I think it's more about the wording. I think it's the auspiciousness as opposed to the guarantee
Yeah.
aspect. But I'm speculating on this point, so it'll be
Thank
good
Prabhuji,
if we go through.
please, can you explain me Bhagavad Gita 8:26, that when it's saying that there are two ways of passing from this world, one in light and one in darkness. So when one passes in light, he does not come back, but when one passes in darkness, he returns. What exactly that means, Prabhuji? Light and darkness.
Yeah, so there's two ways you could see it. One is the literal, which is, as Prabhu was mentioning, also regarding like the times of day, times of the year, etc. But when you read this, if you haven't read Bhishma Stutiya from Bhagavatam, right, the section of the Bhagavatam in Canto 1 where Bhishma's prayers are kind of described when Bhishma Dev is passing away, then read through that and then go through this, yeah,
Oh.
because when you read it with Bhishma Stuti, you see that Bhishma Dev waited for the light before passing away.
Mhm.
And Bhishma Dev's light was Krishna's presence. It
Mhm.
wasn't light outside. It was the fact that Krishna was present when Bhishma Dev passed away.
Mhm.
So you could see it in two ways. One is the literal, which, yeah, I don't know the answer to because it links into what Prabhu's question was.
Yeah.
But the second is you could, if you take this in conjunction with the devotees' practices, is this idea that where there's Krishna, i.e. light, there is no Maya, i.e. darkness.
Mhm.
Okay. Then most of people go in the darkness then.
And that's where a devotee is para dukhi dukhi. We want to
Yeah.
compassionately see that. We want to support them.
True.
Yes. Thank you, Prabhuji, for that. Thank you, Prabhuji. I will
Thank
go
you,
through
Prabhuji.
that.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. We will take that as the last question. I know we have a couple more questions. I have taken note of the questions that we didn't answer, along with some that someone has sent in through the Q&A part. So I've noted down these questions, and we hope, Prabhu, that we can have you again in the future. I'm sure, speaking on behalf of everyone, we'd love to have you again in the future for some of these questions we weren't able to go through, and hopefully maybe it can be a slightly longer session. So I just want to give 3 Haribols to Prabhu for giving us his time. So Haribol,
Haribol.
Haribol,
Haribol.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna, Hare Bol.
Hari Bol. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Patitanam Paveभ्यो Vaishnavyo.
Vaishnavibhyo namo namah. Anantakoti Vaishnava ki jai.
Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you.
Hare
And
Krishna.
please do keep joining the Krishna book readings. It's nice.